Matthew chapter 22. And Jesus answered and spake unto them again in parables, and said, The kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king, which made a marriage for his son, and sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding, and they would not come. Again he sent forth other servants, saying, Tell them which are bidden, Behold, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready, come unto the marriage. But they made light of it, and went their ways, one to his farm, another to his merchandise. And the remnant took his servants, and entreated them spitefully, and slew them. But when the king heard thereof, he was wroth, and he sent forth his armies, and destroyed those murderers, and burned up their city. Then saith he to his servants, The wedding is ready, but they which were bidden were not worthy. Go ye therefore into the highways, and as many as ye shall find, bid to the marriage. So those servants went out into the highways, and gathered together all as many as they found, both bad and good, and the wedding was furnished with guests. And when the king came in to see the guests, he saw that there was a man which had not on a wedding garment. And he said unto him, Friend, how camest thou in hither not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then said the king to his servants, Bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. Then went the Pharisees, and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk. And they sent out unto him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Master, we know that thou art true, and teachest the way of God in truth. Neither carest thou for any man, thou regardest not the person of men. Tell us therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar, or not? But Jesus perceived their wickedness, and said, Why tempt ye me, ye hypocrites? Show me the tribute money. And they brought unto him a penny. And he saith unto them, Whose is this image and superscription? And they say unto him, Caesar's. Then saith he unto them, Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. When they had heard these works, they marveled, and left him, and went their way. The same day came to him the Sadducees, which say that there is no resurrection, and asked him, saying, Master, Moses said, If a man die, having no children, his brother shall marry his wife, and raise up seed unto his brother. Now there were with us 7 brethren, and the first, when he had married a wife, deceased, and having no issue, left his wife unto his brother. Likewise the second also, and the third unto the 7th. And last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife shall she be of the 7? For they all had her. Jesus answered and said unto them, Ye do err, not knowing the Scriptures, nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry, nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. But as touching the resurrection of the dead, have ye not read that which was spoken unto you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the multitude heard this, they were astonished at his doctrine. But when the Pharisees had heard that he had put the Sadducees to silence, they were gathered together. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, and saying, Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. While the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them, saying, What think ye of Christ? Whose son is he? They say unto him, The son of David. He saith unto them, How then doth David in spirit call him Lord, saying, The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou on my right hand, till I make thine enemies thy footstool. If David then call him Lord, how is he his son? And no man was able to answer him a word, neither durst any man from that day forth ask him any more questions. Matthew chapter 22 begins with a parable, and it's a parable about a marriage, and it has a lot of similar ideas to chapter 21. And this is still the same day as chapter 21. And so now at this point, Jesus has been in the temples. He's come into the city triumphantly, with the whole city going crazy at Jesus coming in and going into the temples. He's flipped over the temples, and he's been healing and preaching And many people have come up, the most respected people of the time have been trying to catch Jesus in something, to try to trip him up. And so they've been bothering him. And he gives the last chapter, chapter 21, ends with Jesus roasting these people. He is just completely, these were the most respected people of the time, and in a way that was all framed about religion and about being the most righteous. And Jesus is just roasting all of the most respected people of the time, and in ways that make them want to literally go grab Jesus and kill him right in that instant, because of the things that he's saying against them is such. And it's really the same idea with the parable in this chapter. It's saying the same kind of ideas as chapter 21, which is that all the people, or most of the people walking around these parts, who walk around like they own the place and like they're the holiest and that they know best and that they're the chosen people, they're not, and they're going to be rejected, actually, and others are going to take their place. And this parable actually is you could probably study this parable and make a lot of conclusions from it, because there's just a lot going on. Because there's the whole aspect of, well, there's the people who the marriage was made for, but then none of those people even came. And I think that those are the people that are probably Jesus is talking about, the Pharisees and the Sadducees of the time, the all-important people who originally were called to the marriage, and then they didn't come. And then, because then they have other people, because then they fill up the marriage with just people from the streets, good and bad. And then there's even this third thing in this parable that talks about the man who didn't have his garment. And this seems separate from, well, good and bad people were brought to the marriage. And then there was this man without his garment, and he was bound hand and foot and cast into outer darkness. So it's a really good, interesting parable that you could just study that parable a lot and come up with a lot of interesting conclusions, I think. But for this video, I'll just keep it to saying, basically, he's continuing doing what he's been doing from the last chapter, which is in the temple, still in the temple, and continuing to roast the people of the time who made it off like they were the most pious. And this is something that came up in, I think, the previous chapter, but I didn't mention it. And Jesus, this is something that he says more than once. For many are called, but few are chosen. And that's definitely right. Don't the Marines take that, basically? And then I know I just read this a few days ago, which is kind of interesting. Apparently Mormons really are into that expression, which is funny to me. And I don't know, because when I read something like "for many are called, but few are chosen," to me that would not correlate to, oh, the few who are chosen is all of us Mormon people. I could just see Mormon, I don't know the context of this, somebody will have to explain, but I was just reading something about Mormons, and this verse came up, for many are called, but few are chosen, and I can just see Mormon people being like, oh yeah, we're the few who were chosen, like this group of people and all their family and all. That's not what, when I see that many are called and few are chosen, it's much more spread out. It's like a ton of people are called to this place, and then 2 or 3 of them are chosen out of that crowd. It would be like if out of all of the various denominations were sprinkled a few people who actually knew the real message and weren't corrupted. I highly doubt that there's like one denomination out there who, oh, they got it figured out and they're the saved ones and everybody else is not saved. I don't think that's how it works at all. I think that many are called and few are chosen means that people that are saved, it's really a case-by-case basis. And God knows every individual's heart, and it's going to be scattered and random around. I mean, it won't be random, but it'll appear random. It's not going to be like, oh yeah, every Mormon got saved, or something like every Catholic got saved. No, it's not going to be like that at all. Anyways, it's an interesting statement by Jesus, and he says it more than once. Many are called and few are chosen. And I think it's one of those things. If you're walking around stating that you're the chosen one, you're probably not the chosen one. That's just my opinion about that. I'll leave it at that. This chapter has one of the best encounters of Jesus and these people that were trying to catch him. And that's the render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Everybody marveled. And so I wrote down here that even in KJV, this is somewhat relevant, somewhat off topic. What's up with when they randomly have words italicized in the Bible? Leave a comment if you understand what I'm asking about and if you know where the italics came from that are in the Bible, the meaning of italicized words in the Bible. I'm just bringing this up because sometimes when I'm reading, I'll see a word italicized and I'm like, I have zero idea why that word got italicized out of all of it. It's like confusing to me. Why would you italicize that? But this is an instance where the italics really make sense, that it's emphasizing that they marveled when Jesus told them the answer to that question. These were the top of the top. We are in Jerusalem, in a temple. The entire city has been moved, and everybody is in there. Everybody who's in anybody is in there. And these are their best guys coming up with their best questions, the questions that are racking the brains of these religious people of the time. And Jesus just comes back with the most simple but deep, and he blows everybody's mind with his perspective. I can just feel the seething jealousy that these people probably felt when Jesus would come back with an answer like that. They probably were like, oh, why couldn't I have come up with that? His answers are just so brilliant. So continuing on in a very long day, later that day, it was the Pharisees that asked him about paying tribute. And then later that day, the Sadducees. And could you just imagine all these different groups forming their little groups and conspiring against Jesus? And then later they come together. So here, Jesus schools them again. Later that day, the Sadducees argue in bad faith using a thought experiment about 7 different wives. So I always like to bring up this, that the Sadducees are arguing in bad faith. They don't even believe in the resurrection, but they come up and they ask Jesus this complicated thought experiment that probably never actually happened about the resurrection. And so I won't go into the specifics of it, but to me, that's a clear hypocritical thing to do, arguing in bad faith. People do that all the time, where they come up to you and they pretend that they're sympathetic to your cause, but they're actually trying to undermine you. That actually happens to Jesus all the time. I forget, I think maybe it did happen in this chapter. If it's not this chapter, then it's the previous one or the one after this, where I think maybe it is this chapter, when the whole Caesar thing, maybe it's right before that. But anyways, people come up to Jesus and they're trying to catch him in something. And yeah, it is the Caesar part, because they come up to him and they're like, oh, Jesus, they give him even a respectable name, even though they hated him and wanted to kill him. Oh, we know that you love God and that you don't respect men, and that they front load their question about Caesar with trying to pretend like they're complimenting Jesus. And you just see that today still all the time. Backhanded compliments. People start out trying to pretend to be sympathetic, and then they just totally try to undermine you. I mean, you can go look up what concern trolling is, because it's a shill tactic that is this exact idea. Concern trolling is when somebody they try to appear to be sympathetic to your cause, and then they start dropping all these concerns all over the place. And it's like, yeah, you're not subtle. You're not tricking me. You are not my friend. Anyways, if you ever run into shills, concern trolling is a big thing. And it's the exact way that these people operate. Oh, I'm so sympathetic to your cause. Now answer this trick question. But anyways, Jesus always he knew what they were going to say before they even approached him. So in this chapter, more interesting to me than the strange thought experiment about 7 different wives, blah, 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 Jesus tells them that they do err, not knowing scriptures. So he's calling the Sadducees that they can't even read their own scriptures. And he says that in death, or in resurrection, after death, in resurrection, we are going to neither marry nor, as the angels of God are. We're not going to marry or be married. And I mean, maybe that's where the whole "till death do us part" comes from in the vows. People who correctly understood that when we're married until death, and then in the resurrection, I don't think that we're going to be married anymore. And yeah, that's an interesting topic. It's something that I don't fully understand, and sexuality is just a big question. What was the point? What was the point of all this? Male, female, sex, reproduction, if in the end we're all just going to be like angels and not have marriage, what was the point of it then? And I mean, I'm sure that there are points. I'm just asking a question. Verse 32, when Jesus talks about how the Father, how God says, I am the God of Abraham and etc., and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. So I'm not entirely sure how this applies, and so I'll just always point this out in case somebody knows and they can leave it in the comments. So just my question here is, I understand the conclusion. Jesus makes the conclusion that God is the God of the living, not of the dead. I'm just not entirely sure why being the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob, maybe, I guess my conclusion is just on why does that imply or make the conclusion that God is the God of the living and not of the dead? Because, I mean, aren't those people dead by then? So leave it in the comments. Okay, then finally, a lawyer approaches and asks Jesus what the most important commandment is. And he says, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind." And he says the second one is like unto that, and that's to love thy neighbor as thyself. And I think it makes sense why it's like unto that. If you do love God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, then you want to do his will. And part of doing his will is to love thy neighbor as thyself. So the second one would follow from the first one. So I understand that aspect of it. And I guess I'll just say that the second one is more of one that is more readily obvious. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That's usually more obvious to the outside observer that, okay, that's a person who's really nice to other people. It's something that you would be able to see. But loving God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, that's a very personal thing. And it just reminds me of the people who they make their life out to be like, they do all that stuff, but we know that behind closed doors they're doing all sorts of wickedness and that they're hypocrites. And so I think that there's a lot of people that they may think that they love God more than anything, but they're just deceived. And yeah. So after all this, Jesus finally asked the multitude a question about the Son of David. Well, about Christ. And so notice up to this point, people have been calling Jesus the Son of David over and over again. And just my takeaway from this, I don't know 100% if this is what it is, why Jesus asked these people about the Son of David and who the Christ is. I think that this is kind of establishing Jesus or the Christ as being more than just the son of somebody important. Jesus isn't just the son of David. Christ is above David. And I think that's what is being shown at this point. And I think it's just kind of really establishing the Son of David as just a mere title and the Christ being above that. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. God bless everyone.